tell it on the mountain. It's like a class. That's like a classic Utah hymn, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of mountains, lots of stuff to tell. You want to know something funny? My personal reference for that song, which is like a gospel standard for any church going person since forever, right? My personal reference for where I first heard that song is The Addams Family.
No kidding. That's
Anybody
not where I
who's
would have expected.
it's early to mid 90s ish movie that was done that
Oh yeah,
the woman who's pretending to be Fester's mother trying to cheat the Addams family out of their money in
as one
character.
does.
She sings
Yeah.
that at one point, and that's what comes into my mind every time I hear that song.
Addams Family doesn't work for me. It gives me the creeps.
I was that kind of kid. My wife sometimes makes fun of me that the only childhood celebrity crush I ever had was on Wednesday Addams. And it wasn't even on any particular actress. It was like the character of Wednesday Addams because I thought she was so cool, like with her knives and her electric chairs and stuff like that.
Oh, there you go. Well, there it is. What are we talking about today?
How to have fun when solo competing. Or maybe put another way, the dangers, a warning against the dangers of solo competing.
Yes.
Which I'm registered. I got registered with WSPBA this year. And so I'm thinking I'm going to
Congratulations.
solo maybe at least a couple times this year. Looking
Ooh.
forward to it. I got out my collection of 2/4 marches and looking through some 6/8s and thinking about what I might do. You're
Well,
telling me
if you are going to solo this year, it's important that you know the dangers.
Yeah, that's get me ready. Are these shark infested waters? What should I be looking out for?
Well, it's possible. I mean, another question would be, why did you stop soloing in the first place?
Mm.
Why are you now rejoining?
Right, yeah.
Did you just not have enough time, or did you become disenfranchised, or what happened?
Yeah, well, for the most part, not enough time. That's the biggest thing for me, yeah. As child number 3 and then child number 4 and then child number 5 joined the ranks, I think I've managed to solo once since we hit kid 3. And so
Oh, yeah. There you go. It'll be good to get back into it, though, because then your kids will want to do it.
that's my hope. That's exactly what I'm hoping. Yeah. But it's a great motivator to play, too. You know, like I went and played another funeral gig earlier this week. And like that kind of gigging, I do think is a lot of fun. Not to say that funerals are fun. I put the fun in funeral when people hire me to play bagpipes. Obviously.
Oh yeah, don't we all?
Yeah, but like those kinds of gigs, I mean, like kind of soloing gigs that aren't competition are fun for sure, and I like those a
Yes.
lot. I think I'd rather do that all the time than like solo year round.
Really? Because I don't think you're being honest. I don't think you're being intellectually honest.
I
What's the
think
difference between the people you play for at a funeral or a wedding versus when you solo compete? There's a key difference here, I believe.
Well, I could be real cheeky and say that the people who I'm playing for at a wedding or a funeral are really likely to tip me.
Okay.
That's one of the differences.
Yeah, but there's a key difference. And I think that solo competing is unique in the sense that it's really our only opportunity to play for an educated audience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And maybe I'm not speaking for everyone here, but I get a lot of enjoyment from impressing an educated audience, or impressing might not be the right word, bringing enjoyment for an educated audience. So I want to play for people who know what good bagpiping is, and I want to give them, something nice to listen to.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can see what you mean.
I think that's a lot different than when you play at a wedding and you're mainly just there for a little bit of aesthetic and a little bit so that they can say they had a bagpiper at the wedding, but that's about the extent of it. So, you could screw up every single D throw royally and no one would know or care, right? So the audience is not really interested in the quality of your music when you're playing a wedding or a funeral. Ooh, that sounds a little controversial when I say it out loud.
Well, I think there are rare exceptions, but for the most part, that sure jives with my experience. It's painful how often when being booked for a gig via whatever platform is being used, that the main question that's being asked is, what will you be wearing? That's really what they're paying for.
Yeah, what will you be wearing? And then I know a lot of women bagpipers will
Oh
tell
man,
you
yeah.
they'll tell you they don't get hired because they don't want a woman bagpiper at their wedding. And these are warning signs, right? Or these are definitely signs that what you're there for is not so that your personal self-expression can be carefully considered. So
Yeah.
solo competing is particularly unique in the sense that it might not be a big audience. It's typically
Hmm.
just one judge sitting there, right? But you do have an audience that is there to consider the quality of your music making, which is very rare. I think that's the appeal of solo competing, right?
That makes sense, definitely. I wonder if my hesitation is actually indicative of some of the dangers of solo competing, where kind of what was in my mind is solo competing stresses me out to some degree.
Why
Obviously,
would that stress you out?
obviously it'd be either in a good way or not to such a degree that I would never want to do it because I want to do it, you know? But I think to myself, could I do this year round? And maybe this is to do with the dangers, right? Maybe this is my own way of thinking of it that's making it this way, but I don't think it would be sustainable for me to do it more than just I'll get through it in the summer and then I can take a break from it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly kind of interesting. It also kind of makes me think that there's like an innocence window or
Mm,
something like that, or a cluelessness window
mm.
where you'll do your best competing, probably. I
Yeah.
find this is true with CrossFit now. It's like now that I know so much about it and I've done it for so long, I'm outside of the innocence window. I'm not in there anymore.
Mm.
I actually know how bad it's going to hurt. And so that makes me not want to, yeah, to your point, it kind of stresses you out beforehand. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to do this. And then the same could be true for solo bagpipe competing as well. It's like there's a phase there where you're just going out there, seeing what happens, and enjoying yourself. And then at a certain point, maybe you get to the point where if you know that you're not likely to achieve your personal historical best, it
Mm.
makes you not want to do it. I think that's my
Wow.
hang up. That's my current hang up. That's why I don't do a lot of solo competing is because the pros don't outweigh the cons for me, generally speaking. You got to get up early, you got to get dressed, you got to travel. It would take solid preparation far in advance to go out there. And then, yeah, it's tough to produce your personal, it's harder. It's not really tough, but it's harder to produce
Hmm.
what you know you're capable of when you're 39. It's harder now than it was when I was 29.
Yeah. You're being a very effective like a psychologist for me here. You're digging things up from my past, maybe inadvertently, Andrew. Because what you're saying there makes me wonder too how much of it might be that innocence window might be that like the first time I went and soloed, I was thinking about going to play the music. I was not thinking about reading painful stuff off of a judging sheet
Mm,
afterward because I hadn't
yeah.
done that yet. And after having had some negative experiences doing that, then getting ready to solo, I'm already thinking about the judging sheet instead of,
Hmm.
it's like what I'm imagining is going to happen is jumping past the music and thinking about that
Yeah.
experience.
Yep, exactly. And so I think we are kind of hinting towards some of the dangers of solo competing. For me, the golden rule, and we talk about this a lot at the dojo, the golden rule is that we should always be playing for self expression, right? And we should never be playing for accolades. So
Mm.
for me, the big danger with solo competing, and I definitely I have an easier time with this when I play in the pipe band than when I play solos for some reason. And maybe we should get a proper psychologist in here to help us work this out. But it's really difficult not to get caught up in the accolades or, like you said, I mean, the bad score sheet is not exactly an accolade is usually thought of as a positive thing. But yeah, the score sheet that you're going to get at the other side, and you're kind of worried about what it might say. And then the other big thing with solo competing is it's pretty difficult not to be worried about your competition and how well they're going to play and whether or not you're going to be able to win the prize or not.
Yeah. You're thinking about other people quite a lot in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, another one is, am I above grade level or at the grade level or
Mm.
below the grade level? And you're stressed out about what the grade level is. Or am I going to get my AGL so that I can get my upgrade next year and all that kind of stuff? And you're focused on moving through the grades. And it's easy to fixate on all of these things and skip the most important part, right? And or maybe the only important part, which is that this is one of your rare opportunities to play for an audience that is going to listen carefully to what you're doing and thoughtfully consider your musical expression and offer you valuable feedback on it. That's the thing. And that's what solo competing should be about. That's what we should be focused on. Is, hey, can I play some awesome music today? Yeah, let's do that. Let's do our best today. Let's make that happen. That's what it should be about. And then usually the accolades are a natural byproduct of that. If you do a really good job expressing yourself musically, and which, by the way, technique is a big part of that, and tuning and all that stuff. So if we do a good job expressing ourselves today, there's a good chance we might get a little prize or something. Right?
Who doesn't like a little neck medal?
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to understand the priorities and to be able to do that. It's one of the reasons.
Oh, go ahead.
By the way, it's one of the reasons that I tell people, especially beginners and intermediates, I would say all the way up to like grade 3 or 2, at least, is have an expert there that can tune you up on the day of your solo competition.
Yeah.
Now, I say that for a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is we want to keep solo competitions low key. We don't want to struggle to tune our own pipes for an hour and where we may or may not succeed, right? And then you go out and you play your tune and it doesn't go that great. Like that represents a hugely negative experience there. It's best to delegate that to someone else. Now, I'm not saying always. I'm saying on the day of solo competition. If at all possible.
Especially early on, right?
Yeah. If at all possible, it's better to just warm up for a few minutes, have somebody there that can help you, lock the pipes in tune before you go on. Go on, tweak the drones if you are confident with that, but you go on and then you play your tune. Certainly for your lower grades, like your grade 4 or whatever, just get tuned up and then go out and play your tune and make it like a half an hour investment of your time maximum, right? And then we're not going to put tons and tons of stress on it. We're going to go out there and we're going to enjoy playing the best tune that we can play. That's what we should do, and then as you get better and better, tuning yourself will become less and less of a big deal, less and less stressful, more and more of an organic part of the playing process, right? So over time we'll do that. But yeah, I think to your original point, keeping it fun and light and not super high stress is the name of the game. We need to find ways to do that so that we don't fall into the common traps. What happens if you play solo competitions for the wrong reasons for too long?
I would imagine you stop playing them eventually, just because why would you keep going through all of that for something that's miserable?
And if solo piping is miserable, which causes you to not really want to do it anymore, what the result of that is you no longer have anything on your regular yearly calendar. You no longer have anything where you're playing as an individual for a discerning audience that's going to give you direct criticism on something that you practice hard to do your best on. So what's going to be the result to your overall quality of play?
Surely going to go down.
Yeah.
Stagnation would be best case scenario, but I can't imagine that stagnating would even be likely. I think it would definitely go down. I mean, personally, the years when I'm not soloing, I definitely see a dip in how I play.
Yeah.
It has to do with reps that I'm putting in, the amount of focus, all kinds of stuff that definitely goes down.
Yep, exactly. So solos are, I think, an important thing that if you're serious about getting better at the bagpipes, you probably want to integrate it into your life a little bit, because that's your chance to really put yourself under pressure and see how it goes. There's other ways you could do that, but you'd have to do that all yourself. Solo competitions is typically a really nice community of pipers that get together, all interested in improvement. There's a community of judges that are there to help the players, and you got to get out there and you got to do it and have fun.
The way that you describe it there, Andrew, I feel is an important shift that I experienced. So like when I first started playing, I didn't know to be afraid of the judges until I had one pretty negative experience with one particular judge. And I then adopted what I think maybe a lot of us experience, at least at some point, a kind of us and them view of the situation, that I was there to fight my best, not so much against the other players as against the judges. And that the judges were like the bad guys who were just there to try to pick apart anything they could. And so I was there to fight against them, to try to protect myself against them, right? and it was actually stewarding, helping out with stewarding duties at some competitions
Yep.
that first made me realize that, because then I was spending time with the judges. I was driving them to and from their hotels and stuff like that. And I started to have this shift in perspective where it's like, oh no, these are like amongst bagpiping nerds. These are the nerdiest of the nerds, and they're just here to nerd out about bagpipes with me, And
Well,
so when you
maybe.
say, hopefully, I guess at least I'm going to keep that headcanon, because that helped me to feel more like you say that, oh, this is just a group of people who are all interested in the same thing, including the judges.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's observe how I'm playing together and talk about it together. It's not, let me attack you. That shift helped me quite a bit.
Yeah. I think most judges are great, but definitely some of them, some of them that I'm aware of and that I know of, and I have to double check myself that you don't fall into this, but some of them are, out of touch or willfully ignorant or sort of willfully forgetting what it was like for them as a solo competitor.
Mm.
And it's important to put yourself in the shoes of the competitor, and yes, and not to let the comments be discouraging toward the overall pursuit, right?
Mm.
By the way, the higher level the competition gets, the worse that tends to get, in my experience.
I'd
Where,
imagine also the higher level the player, they can kind of handle that better too, right?
of course, yep. And by the way, the higher level player you are, the more of the game you have agreed to play, right?
Right. Yeah.
By the time you're a professional player, I mean, you're in it to win it, right?
Mhm.
Hopefully. You're not just there to, oh, let's see how it goes. By the time you're a professional, I'm going to sneeze. There you go. By the time you're a professional, you're playing more elements of the game, and a lot of your preparation will be to separate yourself, not just as a musician, but also as a competitor, I think.
Yeah. I imagine, not being a judge myself, but I imagine there being a challenge that's maybe not unlike a celebrity, where when a celebrity goes out in public, they'll have maybe hundreds and hundreds of people coming up to them, wanting to
Yeah,
shake their hand.
that's what
sign
it's
their-
like for me. That's what it's like for me. Yeah,
You got a double since you're a celebrity and a judge.
I know.
But in
Just
the way that like
hundreds
you
of
might
them.
have,
Oh my God, there's Andrew.
yeah, that's right, like running toward you, right? But I'm imagining that for a celebrity, it might be a challenge that person number 52 today that came up to, imagining I'm the celebrity, that came up to me to say, oh, I love your work, whatever it is, right? I feel like I've now been interrupted 52 times, even though for that person, that's their first time. And I'm imagining something like that happening with judges where maybe the first two competitions of the morning, you're like, clarifying what you mean, you're kind of being careful with your comments and trying to get at the heart of what you're driving toward and helping them improve. By the end of the day, it's like mentally it's maybe hard to separate out, this is this person's first competition, or of the day at least, or maybe it isn't, but do you see what I mean? Instead of being like, in the third part, here's something that you could work on, it's doublings are messy. It gets
sure.
like really choppy, and then
Well, and lazy and insensitive
mm,
and not cool. Yeah.
it
And
takes some,
also, side note, the judges are underpaid. Yeah. Yeah, because man,
Yeah.
it's exhausting, and it's a huge test of endurance for a judge to sit there, and you're basically educating
mhm,
players on every score sheet, right?
for 12 hours
Yep.
on a weekend.
And then that's a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult. And you want to give thoughtful feedback to every competitor as they play.
Yeah, it's got to be hard to
Very difficult.
reset for every single competitor like that.
Yeah.
But that also could fall to us as competitors too, when we're looking through the sort of hastily jotted down notes, to try to kind of read it with that kind of filter. And maybe that can
Yes.
help it to land more softly for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think generally speaking, it's really kind of interesting, right? But generally speaking, I take my score sheet, I read it once through, I see if there's anything that I hadn't thought of before.
Mm.
Usually you've thought of it already. And I make a value judgment as to whether or not I'm going to, think more seriously about that particular score sheet. Because at the end of the day, you're going to do what you're going to do. And if you're a beginning level player, it's going to be something you're working on with your instructor. But even at the beginner level, I mean, judges are going to have a wide array of things that they're looking for. And so really you got to take that criticism and you have to translate it into your own system and your own approach to figure out what ways that would be valuable. So yeah, and you'll get a lot of different styles of score sheets as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, I do think it's up to the judge to make sure that what they're doing is supportive. You have to criticize. You can't just be nicey nice. Sometimes there are weaknesses that have to be discussed, but you have to discuss it in a way that's not utterly discouraging to the player.
My favorites have always been the situations where, like, maybe competition isn't, like maybe the morning isn't as booked up as in other situations. There's some breathing room as far as scheduling goes, and a judge.
Oh, you're not going to say you like when the judge talks to you after?
I like that. I think that's
No.
awesome. I like that a lot.
Nope, you're incorrect about this, Jim. Yeah, now, don't get me wrong. I don't have anything against doing that after the competition is over, but no, it's a big no-no. You can't do that because it's like, oh, Andrew took Jim aside and talked to him for 6 minutes and he didn't talk to me at all.
Yeah, well, that would be the hard thing, right? If you're going to do
What's
it with one, you have
that?
to do it with everyone, huh?
What's going on with that? Oh, Jim must just be a nicer guy than me. And now he's trying to curry favor with the judge.
And that's why I like it.
Yeah, but no, that's a big no-no. Like during the competition, I think we have to kind of hold true to the basics, which is you come up, play your tune, and then you leave. I really don't like when judges get into that thing where they do a 7-minute lesson after every performance.
Well, I can see your point. I can see that making sense. I wonder if it's maybe
It's saying, it's kind of like if you're watching a basketball game and after every call that the ref does, he explains the call.
Right. But to one specific player, calls that player.
Oh, by the way, I called that a foul because you weren't in defensive position beforehand, and then there was a little slap on the wrist there. And then the guy comes back with like questions like, well, how do I get in better position? And then the referee, no, that would make it terrible. And it would make the game go on forever, and it would just annoy everybody. And no, so we're not going to do that, Jim. We're not going to do that.
It's funny to me because I do understand. I can see your point. At the same time, that sounds like, to me, a great way to play basketball. I'm not a very sportsy guy, and so like I lack confidence when it comes to playing sports. If I had a ref that was helping me holding my hand through the process, I would feel more comfortable on the court.
Where's the right place to do that, though? There is a right place for what we're talking about, and that is, on a basketball team during practices and scrimmages. Okay, that's a certain type of thing. But then in the actual game, you're not doing that. So during a scrimmage, the coaches might pretend to be referees. And they're going to make certain calls. And then during a scrimmage, you can have everybody take a break for 30 seconds and be like, why did I call that foul there? Well, I called that foul there because he didn't have his feet set. And that's something you all got to think about. So during practice, that's a good thing. I like that. And then for bagpipe solo competing, that's what your lessons are for. Right? Your lessons are for hearing the tune and having a nice discussion about it, and maybe even incorporating things you've seen on recent score sheets, and we can talk about it. But on the day of the competition, that's not what it is. On the day of the competition, it's time to get up there, play your tune, and you have to do that in a way that's, I don't know what the right word is. It's like democratic or egalitarian or something, in the sense that everybody goes up and does the same thing. And the judge doesn't give anybody any particular treatment other than producing their criticism of the performance.
Yeah.
And ranking them relative to each other. Yeah. It's game time, right? On solo competition day, it's game time.
And as we've mentioned on the show here before, and as many people have talked about before as well, competing with music already is inherently weird in a lot of ways. And so you got to remove as many variables as possible to kind of get as close to an objective standard as possible. And this would be part of that, I'm sure, too.
Yep.
So, Andrew, I'm curious if these are some of the dangers of solo competing, what's the other end of that stick? What's the other side of that coin? What are some of the benefits, in particular, that come to mind first of like, why should I want to solo compete? What am I going to get out of it?
Really, I mean, I think it boils down to what we talked about earlier. It's an opportunity to play for an audience's undivided attention. And that audience is, very educated and really able to understand the nuances that you're trying to produce as a player. So it has the potential to really skyrocket the quality of your play. And it's an extremely enjoyable thing to do, right? You get up there and you play your personal best in front of someone who can truly appreciate what it is. It's pretty darn neat.
I love that every solo tune that I've played with has become part of my repertoire, you know, like it naturally kind of gets in my bones and I carry it with me from then on. I've still never soloed at a level where I would need to have multiple tunes prepared and then the judge would choose which one, you know? So that's foreign to me.
There.
I imagine that being like the same experience, but on steroids if I'm prepping multiple tunes for a thing, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't really, I mean, I don't know, it never really factored in.
That's how everybody who's playing at that level that I've ever talked to treats it. It's always like we're driving to the competition and like, I wonder which tunes should I submit? I've got, 12 to choose from. Which ones will I,
Well, that's probably, you could do that at some competitions, but at others you would definitely want to have a very strict plan. It might depend on, the time of year or the mood that you're in or whatever. Also, if you're going to go play at a wedding, how hard are you going to work? How much thought are you going to put in to learning to play Highland Cathedral? I mean, you'll get the tune going, but you're not going to go over it with a fine-tooth comb 1,000 times because there's just no incentive to do that. They're going to pay you the same amount, whether you play crappy or you play well. But with solo competing, it's incentive. It's incentive. That's why. It's incentive to see just how refined you can make a bagpipe tune. That's an amazing thing. And note that I'm talking about you refining the music. I'm not talking about you bashing the skulls of your competitors. Like that might happen, right? I love bashing skulls.
Figuratively.
Yeah. I love bashing skulls, but the real reward is going to be, okay, I worked my butt off to prepare this tune and it really knocked the judges' socks off. And it was great to perform this thing that I've been working so hard on.
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.